Good day, everybody. Welcome to this yearly lunch debate for World Hearing Day from the European Parliament. This is a yearly activity we are doing since 2013, joined in fact with the associations EHIMA, EFHOH, Euro-CIU and EHIMA, and in close cooperation with the World Health Organization. The theme this year is Ear and Hearing Care for All. Let's make a reality. And we have a wonderful panel of speakers that will introduce you into this theme. So we are looking forward for all the exchanges. Now for some practicalities. For the debate, it's interesting that we can hear what is the most popular question you may have, and that will then be used in the debate. Enter your questions in the Q&A, so not in the chat, because we won't see that. Enter your questions in the Q&A. And if you see it in the Q&A, you will see that next to each question, you have the option to click on a little heart. That means that you like that question. And the more likes a question will get, the higher it will be ranked, and the most likely it will be used during the debate. The other aspect is we are making sure that this debate is inclusive and accessible for people that need support. And I think the support we are preparing right now is closed captioning, but also closed captioning in different languages. If you are happy with the closed captioning in English, then you just click the CC in the bar under, and you will get the closed captioning as well. If you want to have your closed captioning in a browser on a separate window, just look at in the chat, there is a link posted there. And if you click on that link, you will go to text on tap. Then you can see all the speech to text in a separate window and browser. And this also gives you the opportunity to have it in your own language if you would like that. Translations are available in Danish, Dutch, French, German, Italian, Polish, Slovenian, and Spanish. So many languages to choose from, and you do that on speech on tap by using the link you will find in the chat. If anything is unclear, if you have technical problems, then you can use the chat. If you want to have a question for the debate, I repeat it, please use it in the Q&A. So now I suggest we get started. I would like to introduce our host, MEP David Lega. He is from Sweden and from the EPP. Next to his strong career as a politician, both in Sweden and in the European Parliament, he's also a very successful Paralympic swimmer. In fact, he has beaten 14 world records. And as you will hear, next to this, he's a husband, he's a friend, he's a very good speaker, and you will hear that in his video. So let me introduce you and give the floor to MEP Lega to give the introduction of this event. And thank you for being our host.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this virtual debate at the European Parliament called Ear and Hearing Care for All. This is a yearly conference organized by the European Association of Hearing Aid Professionals on the World Hearing Day. My name is David Lega, and I'm honored to be your host today. First, a couple of words about the practical arrangements. All presentations during the conference will be subtitled, and the debate will be supported by speech to text to ensure that this debate is accessible for all people with hearing loss. And the subtitles will be available in 8 languages: French, German, Spanish, Polish, Italian, Slovenian, Danish, and Dutch. I myself am a member of the European Parliament representing Sweden since 2019. I am a member of the Swedish Christian Democrats and the European People's Party, EPP. I serve on the Committee on Foreign Affairs and the Subcommittee on Human Rights. However, I myself was born with a severe disability, and before being a politician, I had a Paralympian swimming career and managed to win several World Championship gold medals. I used to say that I had the fortune of being born at the exact right time and place to live a good life. And this feeling sparked my commitment to give back to the society, and has been something of a red thread in my political career. Upon being elected a member of the European Parliament, I pledged to be the voice of the people who have the most difficulties in being heard. And today I use that platform to advocate and legislate for the sake of children's rights, minority rights, fighting for freedom of religion, and highlighting the situation for people with various disabilities. So it is a true honor for me to welcome you to this event to discuss ear and hearing care for all. And I would like to start by thanking you all for being here. And thank you to AEA, the European Association of Hearing Aid Professionals, for organizing this event. Today I'm very pleased to announce that we will hear from representatives of the World Health Organization, the European Hearing Instrument Manufacturers Association, the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People, and the European Association of Cochlear Implant Users. And I'm glad to have you all present today. It is great to see that hearing care professionals, hearing aid users and manufacturers are all joining forces with the World Health Organization to inform policymakers, including governments and EU institutions, users, but also the wider public about the importance of awareness and intervention regarding hearing loss. As there is more than 52 million hard of hearing people throughout Europe, this is a major challenge and we need to tackle it together. We must work across sectors, across political parties, and also across nation borders to come up with better solutions. Currently, Sweden is leading the work of the EU Council. Sweden, my government, will hold the EU presidency the coming 6 months. And the Swedish presidency will, of course, focus on security, but also sustainability and competitiveness. And I would like to concentrate on competitiveness for a second. Because EU competitiveness requires European innovation and research. Innovation is important for European competitiveness and important for the European people. And I don't need to explain to you that technology is a game changer for those who need hearing aid. But sadly, only 1 in 3 of the hard of hearing people use hearing instruments according to Eurotrack. 1 in 3. And untreated hearing loss costs the EU each year almost 200 billion euros due to lost productivity. 200 billion euros. And this number does not cover increased healthcare costs due to untreated hearing loss. 200 billion is more than the full EU budget for 2023. Hearing instruments help to reduce these costs. Hence, we all agree more efforts should be directed to developing hearing technology. But this is not only about costs in numbers. Untreated disabling hearing loss leads to lower quality of life and higher unemployment. Frankly, it's sad, and we should acknowledge this phenomenon as a public health problem. Research shows that people with an untreated disabling hearing loss are at greater risk of social isolation, depression, cognitive decline, and dementia, while people who treat their hearing loss do not experience higher risks than people without hearing loss. So, what to do? As a Christian Democrat, I don't think that legislators can solve everything. However, I do believe it is our duty to simplify circumstances when possible. So back to the Swedish EU presidency. Innovation is important for European competitiveness and is key for hearing technology. Therefore, I am glad that this is one of the Swedish priorities. As you know, the European hearing instrument manufacturers are the world's largest and are leading hearing instrument manufacturing globally. Hearing technology is one of many examples of how free competition in the world's largest market creates products that make life better. So the EU's internal market is the very foundation of our prosperity and welfare. But we cannot take this prosperous market for granted. The market's success is dependent on a fair and level playing field for European companies. Furthermore, the EU must capitalize on the dynamic forces residing in successful companies, not to obstruct them with over-regulation. This would allow European companies to continue to hold their own in global competition, and this should also lead to lower prices, making products more accessible. To conclude, I am a firm believer of the market's force. I believe that we should invest in more research and facilitate European innovation to combat untreated disabling hearing loss. And I am convinced that more cooperation goes a long way. Additionally, it is our common responsibility to do all we can to combat the hearing loss stigma. And living with a disability myself, I know that when you get access to the right tools and the right assistance, our life changes. When I have access to the assistance I need, I don't have to think about my disability in daily life. I am more than my disability. I can become something else. A father, a husband, a member of the European Parliament, a colleague and a friend. And those things occupy my mind most of the time, rather than my disability. I don't have hard of hearing myself, but I do believe that the same applies to you. If persons with hard of hearing would enjoy hearing aids suiting their individual needs, the quality of life would most certainly increase. So let's strive for a future where we don't have to think about our disabilities any longer, where we can, like everyone else, focus on families, on friends, on our careers, but also to have fun. I do look forward to hearing from all upcoming speakers and to discuss with you all together in the debate later, because it's due time to eradicate the stigma and to ensure hearing care for all. Thank you.
So thank you, MEP Lega for this good introduction. It's great. Since more people have joined and we saw some questions already in the chat on the practicalities, let me just repeat. If you want to have closed captioning, just click on the CC. And if you want to have multiple translation, there's a link in the chat you can click, and then you go to speech on tap, to text on tap in a separate window where you can select the language you want. If you have a question, please put those questions in the Q&A. And if you like a question, just click on the little heart, and then we will vote it up, and that will be used in the debate. Okay, after these practicalities, to our next speaker, and we're so happy to have Shelly Chadha on board. Shelly Chadha is the medical officer of ear and hearing care at the headquarters of the World Health Organization in Geneva. She is the driving force behind the World Hearing Forum, behind World Hearing Day, and so many more actions on ear and hearing care. So we are so happy that she is here to introduce the main theme of World Hearing Day today, ear and hearing care for all. Let's make it a reality. The floor is yours, Shelly.
Good afternoon and greetings from the World Health Organization on the occasion of the World Hearing Day 2023. Today, I'd like you to join me on a short journey, a journey into the future. The year 2050. Let's go into the year 2050. 2050, by this year, it is anticipated that there will be nearly 10 billion people living on Earth, and that over 7% of them, that is about 700 million, would be in need of ear and hearing care. 2050, the world, for those of us who are alive at that time, will probably be a very different place. It is anticipated that we could travel from one end of the Earth to the other in just 4 hours by this year, and that people will live in fully sustainable underwater cities, and they will go for vacations to hotels built in space. By 2050, it is even expected that people would be able to get brain implants that allow them to remember everything they ever hear, see, or read. The field of hearing care would also have made great advances by this time. There would be even better types of implants, and maybe these implants and aids would even be redundant with regeneration of cochlear hair cells being a reality at that time. But my question to you is, what would this mean? What would this mean for this mother who sits in rural Rajasthan waiting for her child to start speaking, not knowing that he has a hearing loss? What does it mean for this grandfather who is pretending to hear what his family is discussing so as to not be left out? What does it mean for this young child whose parents have to travel a day to take her to see a doctor for her ear discharge? All the technological advances would have no impact on health unless they are accompanied by public health action. And in this case, public health action to integrate ear and hearing care as part of national health plans for universal health coverage. And when we talk about ear and hearing care, we're really talking about all strategies, all interventions that aim at prevention of hearing loss, that aim to identify it at the earliest possible, and to provide care and rehabilitation to those who are in need of it across the course of life and across the continuum of care from the community level up to the tertiary level of care. Currently, most of the ear and hearing care services are focused at the tertiary and at times at secondary level of care. What we now understand is that integrating and providing these services at the primary level, at the community level, can actually address 60% of the need for these services. The World Report on Hearing, which WHO launched in 2021, actually outlines how this is possible through training of non-specialist health workforce in ear and hearing care, also through building capacity at the primary level, through provision of tools and resources, through application of telemedicine and use of digital technology. To facilitate such integration, the World Health Organization has launched a set of training resources for application at the community and primary level. A basic ear and hearing care resource that provides guidance to people working at the community, within the community, about how to prevent hearing loss, how to identify common ear conditions, and how to guide people to seek services and how to care for them. And today we are also launching the Primary Ear and Hearing Care Training Manual, which is a training manual intended for non-specialists to sensitize them on all of these aspects, practical aspects as to how can they work within the constraints of their resources to identify hearing loss and to manage people in an effective way and to refer those that need specialized care. Along with this, the World Health Organization is also launching a set of community resources that can be used by the healthcare providers to sensitize the community about preventing hearing loss, how to identify it within their homes, and how to apply and use certain rehabilitative procedures and processes. So the key here really is integration. These resources need to be integrated into primary care, into universal health coverage. And the need for this integration, I would like to exemplify it with the help of this iceberg. This tip of the iceberg is what we are addressing, what we are seeing. And this is actually only about 17% of the need for ear and hearing care. The wider body of this iceberg, 83% of those in need of care remains hidden from us because they do not often reach the secondary and tertiary level of care. And this need, this width or size of this iceberg is really growing. It is expanding, and it is anticipated that by the year 2050, there will be over 700 million that will be in need of these services. And so it's time that we take cognizance of this fact and we act to address this rising prevalence. In summary, ear and hearing problems are really some of the most common health conditions that are encountered in the communities, in populations. Over 60% of these can be addressed at the primary level. Integrating into primary care services, it is possible. It is possible through training and capacity building at this level. And such integration will, of course, benefit people who are in need of these services, but it will also help countries move towards attaining the goal of universal health coverage. So WHO calls upon governments, upon policymakers and civil society to improve access to ear and hearing care. To do this through integrating ear and hearing care into national plans, into policies for universal health coverage, through training healthcare providers that are working at the primary level and building capacity at this level to address these common difficulties. Also, to address it through raising awareness within the communities. So please join us in making ear and hearing care for all a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelly, for this wonderful introduction, and we will make sure to join you, and hopefully all of us do, to make this all a reality. The next speaker is Patrick Daze. He's an audiologist from Belgium, but working in Austria. He has lots of experience in multi-domains in audiology, and he's the board member, one of the board members of EHIMA. So he will talk about adult hearing screening in Europe, a key prerequisite towards a hearing health strategy. Please join us in welcoming Patrick, and the floor is yours, Patrick.
Hello, welcome. My name is Patrick Daze, and today I want to talk to you about adult hearing screening in Europe and how this is a key prerequisite towards a hearing health strategy. Now, what is a challenge to society? If you look at this data from the World Health Organization published in the World Report on Hearing in 2021, you see that on this graphic there are two lines. The red line indicates the numbers of people with hearing loss in millions, and the black line indicates the number of people having a disabling hearing loss in millions again. Now, what you see is that if you look at the evolution through time, that in 2019, there were 430 million people having a disabling hearing loss. Now, if nothing is done, this will evolve to 711 million people by 2050. Now, clearly, there's several levels of hearing loss in there, and clearly not all age groups are affected in the same way. If you look into this graphic from Powers and Bisgard from 22, you see that as older the people get, clearly the prevalence of hearing loss will increase. And we can see that once people are aged 60 to 64, that 12.7% of the people will have a hearing loss, where if you look in the group, for example, 85 to 89, you see that 1 out of 2 is having a hearing loss. Now, it's not just about hearing loss itself, but hearing loss is also associated with a multitude of comorbidities and additional problems. And here you see a listing of some of them. For example, cognitive decline or dementia was already reported multiple times in several publications. Mental health problems, social isolation and withdrawal, reduced quality of life, fatigue both during and after work, people with a hearing loss doing less physical activities, and we also see a higher incidence of falls. Now, we also know that associated with hearing loss is a cost to society, and that cost to society also poses a challenge to it. If we look like 2 years ago, if we look across the EU, so the different member states together, the cost of unemployment, reduced productivity, and early retirement due to untreated hearing loss added up to 185 billion euros per year. Now, this was 17 billion euros more than the EU budget in 2020. If we would include non-medical expenses or medical costs for the other comorbidities as I've listed before, then the true cost of hearing loss is estimated to be around 213 billion. Now, just to give you a comparison, the cost of dementia in Europe will be around 250 billion by 2030. Now, what are solutions to the problem? Clearly, the solutions are out there. On the one hand, you have the conventional hearing aid, where you see different types of hearing aid here on the left-hand side. And this goes from invisible in the canal systems to behind the ear, for example, superpower hearing aids. Now, if conventional hearing aids don't help anymore and people don't benefit from it anymore, for example, in noisy circumstances or in bigger groups, then there's always a solution like a cochlear implant, which you can see on the right-hand side, where obviously you have an implanted part with an electrode and a housing and a magnet, and you also have an external part where you see two different types of it here, a behind the ear processor or a single unit processor. Now, how many EU citizens, taking into account just the adults, use hearing aids and or cochlear implants? If we first look at the hearing aids itself, then again, I want to make use of the publication of Powers and Biscard of 2022. Then you see, for example, the adoption rate for hearing aids in France and in Germany. Now you see that over time, so the different bars indicate different years, so 2009 up to 2022. And you see that the overall adoption rate increases in both countries. It has evolved from something like around 30%, let's say, to a bit more than 40% in Germany, and in France, even up to 45%. Now, this is not the same for all types of hearing loss. If you look into adoption rate, again in adults, but for different types of hearing loss, you see that there's a difference. The bars now indicate different types of hearing loss. So on the one hand, you have the blue bar indicating the mild hearing loss, the orange bar, the moderate severe hearing loss, the gray bar, the severe sensory neural hearing loss, and then the yellow bar, the profound hearing loss. And you see that the higher the degree of sensory neural hearing loss, the higher the adoption rate is. So for the higher levels of hearing loss, we reach, let's say, in Germany, France, and in the US, always an adoption rate of 70%. If you look into mild hearing loss, you see that adoption rates are lower, let's say 22% at the most in France. Now, is it the same for cochlear implants? The answer is no. If we look into adoption rate for cochlear implants in adults in what is called high-income countries, then you see several percentages here for several countries, and you also see the first offers mentioned below it. And you see that for not a single country, the adoption rate or uptake rate is higher than 10%. Germany scores the highest with around 10%, but other countries within the EU, like the Netherlands or Belgium, for example, score around 6.6% or 7%. So why is that? Why is the adoption rate so low at the end? There's several reasons for it. On the one hand, it's a lack of awareness amongst referring professionals. So these might be ENTs in private practice, for example, or might be hearing aid acousticians, where they lack awareness about the hearing aids, about cochlear implants, their indications, their outcomes, and the hearing journey. It is also a lack of awareness amongst the candidates themselves, amongst the population, the people who are eligible for a hearing aid or for a cochlear implant, but they don't know about the existence of it, and they don't know the potential benefit of it. In addition, we see that there's no national hearing screening programs in adults in place in the countries. So you will not detect the people who have it. So people would have a hearing loss, they would not report it, they would not seek advice. And as there's no hearing screening programs in place, we would not find them automatically. In addition, There is the stigma of wearing a hearing aid or cochlear implant, for example, and being seen as disabled. There might be the fear of surgery, and I've put this in italic because this is obviously something which only applies to cochlear implants. But then also there might be lack of adequate funding, lack of access, lack of human and infrastructural resources, for example. However, this would not be the case in the economically advanced European countries, but differences clearly occur within the 27 member states of the EU. Now, if you look into the concept of an adult hearing screening program, what are the recommendations of the World Health Organization? Again, going back to the World Report on Hearing of 2021, at that point in time and in this report, WHO came up with an action plan. The action plan is known under the acronym of HEARING. Now, HEARING stands for Hearing Screening and Intervention, Ear Disease Prevention and Management, Access to Technologies, Rehabilitation Services, Improved Communication, Noise Reduction, and greater community engagement. And it is also the concept that the first four, so the HEAR, can be integrated and delivered through strengthened health systems. Now, let's focus on the hearing screening and intervention in that sense. Referring to another report of the World Health Organization on specifically screening of 2021, which you see here a picture of on the left-hand side, I think the aim is really that all older people should be screened with the aim of identifying at the earliest possible stage those with a hearing loss who would benefit from the use of hearing technology or from non-technical interventions such as education, counseling, and communication training. Now, what are the intervals and at which age would you start? Normally, all adults from the age of 50 should be screened regularly for hearing loss. Initially, it might be conducted at a 5-yearly interval until the age of 64, but from the age of 65 onwards, the frequency of screening should be increased to every 1 to 3 years. And obviously, where possible, the hearing screening schedules should then also be aligned with other health checks, for example, already existing in other countries, or several countries. Now, what are the steps in there towards the screening? On the one hand, there's the first step, which is just using day-to-day life using simple questions. So it's questions, as you can see, do you have a hearing problem now? Do you have a diagnosed hearing loss, and so on? There are scaled questions in there. For example, how would you characterize your hearing at this point in time? And there's also the use of screening questionnaires, such as the Hearing Handicap Inventory for the elderly. The second step might be the use of more semi-objective tests, let's say, where tests like the detection of pure tones in both ears at a fixed decibel level might be used. A test which is very often used also in the WHO app, for example, on screening, is a digit triple in noise test. And you see some other tests also listed below. Now, what happens? So if a refer result is there after wax removal, if this was indicated, then a diagnostic hearing assessment should happen. And that is there then to confirm the hearing loss and obviously establish a degree of hearing loss and the nature of it. And then you see which tests can be performed, with obviously also speech audiometry then in quiet and in noise. Now, as soon as the diagnosis has been made and the nature and the degree of hearing loss has been defined, then an intervention should happen. And the intervention consists out of several parts. On the one hand, it's about basic education and counseling for people who have the hearing loss themselves, but also for the caregivers, the families, in essence, to facilitate psychological acceptance and adjustment. It should also include communication training and, where needed, adaptations in social and physical environments. Now, in addition, obviously, if there's the need, then the type of hearing technology should be assessed, and whatever then is needed, whether it's hearing aids, cochlear implants, or other hearing implants, or hearing assistive technologies, should then be provided and fitted by a trained professional who's authorized to do so. Now, in which European member states are national adult hearing screening programs currently in place? I think the answer is very easy and very straightforward. Nowhere. In not a single country within the EU 27 countries, we have adult hearing screening programs in place. So what needs to change? Clearly, hearing loss must be addressed as a public health issue. It needs to get higher on the agenda of the policymakers, given that it's such a big, or that it has such a big impact by means of the impact on society. It's linking to all the different comorbidities, and it creates a huge economical cost to society if hearing loss remains unaddressed. There is also a need for policymakers to allocate resources for and plan strategically to promote access to ear and hearing care. Thirdly, public health strategies should address prevention, screening such as adult hearing screening, and early intervention of hearing loss. And finally, adult hearing screening should be implemented in all member states in line with other health screening programs which are already existing. And I think it's only like that, if we can accomplish these different goals, that together we can make a difference, and that I think that we can work together within the EU towards a hearing health strategy. With that, I would like to thank you. And if you want to have more information, please consult one of the websites, or please feel so free to send me an email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick, for this very good introduction and on the need for adult hearing screening. I think it's essential. And as a conclusion, as you say, it's happening nowhere in Europe. It's high time to start. Now, before introducing the next speaker, let me just tell you that it's important to put your questions in the Q&A if you want your question to be answered and to be discussed. So feel free to use the Q&A, type your question in, and if you see a great question, then please also like it and make sure it's higher on the agenda. The next speaker is Lidia Best. Lidia is the president of the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People. She's an experienced hearing aid and cochlear implant user, so she knows exactly what she's talking about. And on top of that, EFHOH has organized a whole survey and an evaluation of reimbursement in Europe for hearing aids. They created an EFHOH report on reimbursement on hearing aids, and that is why she's the perfect speaker to talk about hearing care access in Europe with a focus on hearing aids. Lidia, the floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Lidia Best, and I am the president of the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People. It's a pleasure to participate in today's lunch debate on the occasion of the World Hearing Day. My task today is to present hearing aids reimbursement in Europe, the report which the association published last year. Firstly, let me to provide some background of why we did the study. We did it because we believe such study supports lobbying efforts and transparency at national and European level on hearing care policies. It also promotes timely and effective interventions as a regular practice. We focus on questions which relate to reimbursement for adults, ease of access, self-referrals, and freedom of choice of the device. In addition, the reason we've done the study is because we have clear indicators we can look at and use. One of them is the categories of grades of hearing loss, which is given to you now on the left-hand side. And it comes from the World Health Organization, defining different levels of hearing loss and for the people experiencing it. In addition, there is also a policy background and policy way of looking at reimbursement. And that is provision of hearing aids as assistive devices. We discovered in the Article 25b help from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to which most of the countries, especially the whole European Union, is a signatory. And this specific Article B reads, provide those health services needed by persons with disabilities, specifically because of their disabilities, including early identification and intervention as appropriate, and services designed to minimize and prevent further disabilities, including among children and older adults. So there is a clear policy indicator and clear responsibilities on the member states. In addition, those rights are also reinforced by Article 35, healthcare, of the Charter of the Fundamental Rights of the European Union. So what was our methodology and timeline? In December 2021, we have sent out the questionnaires to our members as well as the European Association of Hearing Care Professionals. And we followed on the 2018 study questions. As previously mentioned, we focus on adults, national health, hearing aids reimbursement levels, specifically as part of hearing care provisions in policies. The responses we received were from 18 countries based in the European Union and 3 countries outside of the European Union. Those responses were analyzed and we grouped them during the 2022. It's important to actually acknowledge that the report wouldn't have happened and without a peer review of both our members as well as the members of the European Association of Hearing Aid Professionals. Thank you so much for all your support and encouragement. And then on the 6th of December 2022, we have launched the report. And you can find it now. Here is the link at the bottom, where it is on our website. So what are our findings? A little bit depressing when you think about that our findings are largely unchanged from 2018 report. And many policies, unfortunately, are inconsistent with the World Health Organization recommendation on eligibility thresholds. Positive is that we have new entrants: Spain, Malta, Romania, and Luxembourg. And another positive change is a notable change from France with higher reimbursement for Class 1 hearing aids, meaning that nearly everybody in France can now get hearing aids for free. And here I'm going to share a little bit more in detail of our findings. The coverage for the hearing aids, even by the state, is around 25 to 100%. Now, of the cost. Now, there are some countries which provide the hearing aids free as part of national health programs. In some countries, unfortunately, users need to pay full cost of hearing aids before they receive reimbursement later. And in majority of the countries, there is a minimum hearing aids upgrade every 5 years. Of course, there are exceptions, such as for children, and significant changes to hearing loss. Unfortunately, in some countries, hard of hearing people have no choice in deciding which device suits them best. And that could be because of the reimbursement levels, but also because of the procurement rules. In some countries, the reimbursement policy does not match reality, as we have found, especially issues related around the bureaucratic systems or disjointed actions and policies in place. But the positive news is that the children are supported very well in general, with adults and senior citizens, unfortunately not. So we have to ask the questions. Do we have hearing care for all? with ambitious plans for education and employment, as well as the freedom of movement guaranteed to all European citizens, Europe can do much better in public health. So what are our main recommendations? The recommendations from the report are requiring member states to develop action plan and strategy on hearing loss and deafness, specifically based on hearing interventions as outlined in the World Health Organization World Report on Hearing, focusing on equality, prevention, and rehabilitation to enable people who are hard of hearing equal opportunities. In addition, the strategy should include universal reimbursement provision of hearing aids, as well as rehabilitation, which does not put undue burden on hard of hearing citizens. The strategy should be led by the experts who are working in the field of hearing care and who are in direct consultation with hard of hearing people organizations. The strategy should also define the threshold for reimbursement of hearing aids, corresponding with the World Health Organization mild to moderate hearing loss at 20 to 35 decibels as the minimum level of functional speech understanding in noise. Let's pause for a minute. The investment in the quality of hearing care as part of the universal healthcare provision is actually a sound investment, and I will elaborate more. In addition, person-centered approach hearing care should be seen as the integral part of action plans. And the reason for that is the excerpt from the World Hearing Report from World Health Organization. Two people with the same audiogram configuration can have very different everyday hearing-related difficulties and experiences. For that reason, hearing care systems should be based on the World Health Organization International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health Guidance. Choice and aspirations matter. Allow also professionals time to get to know their clients. What is most important for the clients? Their employment, life goals, hobbies. It honestly matters to us. Follow-up is also needed to be offered, especially for those who are struggling with adapting to hearing aids, to show different communication strategies, assistive listening devices, and support them in adjusting to the new way of life. And for this reason, we call to action. We urge the European government to pay attention to the crisis of cost of living, specifically now, which disproportionately affects hard of hearing citizens who are unable to afford hearing aids and assistive devices, the devices which are essential to hard of hearing people to access and maintain education and employment opportunities. We also urge European governments to follow the recommendations of our report and set up national action plans on hearing loss. No one should be priced out of opportunities just because they experience hearing difficulties. And in addition, there is an economic case. And that is based on the Dr. Laureyns Hartman report, which states, for every €1 spent on hearing care, the EU governments get €10 back in return. And that's based on reduced overall cost of untreated hearing loss, which currently stands at €178 billion per year. Can the European government really afford to do that? To leave untreated hearing loss as it is now? So please, let's make ear and hearing care for Europe a reality, not a wish. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lidia, for this great overview. And we remember that we're not there yet. I think there's a lot of things to improve and to make sure that freedom of choice and access to hearing care is made easier and more effective in Europe. Our next speaker is Teresa Amat. She is the president of the European Association of Cochlear Implant Users, Euro-CIU. She's been there for many years, a driving force behind all of this. And she will talk about hearing care access in Europe and cochlear implants specifically. It's not only her, but she will also involve different members of the association talking about their own experience. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today in this virtual meeting in which Euro-CIU has been invited to participate as a representative of deaf people with European cochlear implant users and their families. Euro-CIU is a non-governmental and non-profit association. Above all, thanks to the Honourable David Lega, the member of the European Parliament who hosts this event, whose main objective is to make the world aware that we all should have access to hearing health. It is true that not all countries have the same health benefits and facilities. As Shelly has already pointed out, but we should focus on the fact that focusing on prevention saves money and benefits the individuals. Until recently, health focused on the lack of health. Therefore, the approach was to return something lost, as it is to cure.
Hi, my name is Ben Glover. I live in London. I had my cochlear implant when I was 2 years old. I love listening to music, especially going to live concerts and theatre. This has led to a career in designing video and animations for live events, such as theatre, music, projection mapping and all sorts. In various projects I've had to interpret music visually to accompany the live performance as a video element was part of the scenic design. I've also worked with creative captioning, where captions are designed for theatre, but as part of the set design through projection or video. This wouldn't be possible without my cochlear implant, as I rely on sound to help fulfill my creative work. Proud to be me, hear me now.
Today, and it's part thanks to the research, the proposal that we put on the table is mainly prevention, caring in an holistic and global way, and accompaniment. Accompany people from all communities by teaching them strategies and giving them tools to be healthy as possible. The paradox is that on many occasions, hearing health is seen and experienced as something secondary, as an stigma attached to old age, the deterioration of age, or a loss that does not affect vital organs. In a life or die type, without delving into the actual real problem. Indeed, it is a real problem that has two faces, one the personal one, and the other the economic and social. In the first case, the individual stops communicating with his environment and might be isolated, and on many occasions without fully developing, affecting all areas of their work, family, and relational life.
My name is Ed. I have now 9 years my cochlear implant. Before my implant, I call only with my parents, and I say I come at 10 o'clock home. That okay, yes, or no, and I repeat what they say, and that was my phone call. But now I call everyone. Last year I worked for the vaccination appointment phone, and I make appointments for everyone for his or her vaccines in Dutch and in English. That was not possible without my implant. Yes, that's my short story.
Regarding the social economic problem, when we act a posteriori to solve something of this hearing loss, the actions normally make the process more expensive. Therefore, hearing health access campaigns all should be a priority for any government. But we cannot and must not stop there. Once the problem is detected, it must be remedied since today we have solutions to alleviate these losses. We have prosthetics such as hearing aids and hearing implants, as well as medical and pharmacological possible solutions. Access to these solutions has already been discussed here, and I think that at this point we must differentiate between children and adults. Even in some countries, that's a clear difference, and I'm speaking of Europe, which, as a president of Euro-CIU, it's what I know the most. Children usually appear as a priority in the different cultures.
My name is Alana and I'm 10 years old. I live in England and I have 2 cats. I love my cochlear implants because they help me hear and experience all the wonderful things in life. These are my waterproof cases and they help me do all kinds of things, like synchronized swimming, playing on the beach and surfing lessons. Proud to be me, hear me now.
Hello, my name is Kush. I like my cochlear implants because I can talk to my friends through my PlayStation and I can learn how to play the piano. Proud to be me, hear me now.
We have the touchstone with the elderly in an aging society that wants to remain autonomous and included.
My name is Ingrid, and the first time when I connected my CI, the first noise I heard was like a computer which connected with the internet, and it's going like a beep, 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 beep.
I'm very happy with my implantat. I can understand it now. My wife, my children and grandchildren. Without this, I am deaf. So it is very good for understanding that I have this say.
Patrick has already presented us with a screening proposal for adults, which should be included in the different health policies of each country and territory. And Mark will talk about this next, about what it costs not to act using aids, hearing aids or cochlear implants that are already available. We already published a document that's called Spend to Save that talks about this. Regarding traditional hearing aids, that is, Lidia has already told us about the difficulty of access, not only because of the high economical costs are not covered in most countries, but also because of the need of pertinent and specific adjustments for its proper functioning. In the case of cochlear implants, curiously, the elderly does not have an easy access to it, despite the fact that in Europe we have around 500,000 users of all ages, and it's really interesting and even perhaps surprising the fact that we know from the book of the cochlear implant in adults and the elderly presented on the 21st of February in Spain that 50% of the world cochlear implants are in Europe. This makes us proud as to be Europeans, which public health system encourages us to develop in the human values and quality that define the all Europe. We are aware that, and this is a big but, only 1 of 10 possible candidates to be implanted have access to it. It's not just the access that worried us. We have detected that not only in Europe, thanks to the results of the survey carried out by KICA, the International Community of Action, is that we have participated, is that mainly health professionals do not value this technology as suitable for people of the third or fourth age, or the elderly. The uncertainty of undergoing a surgical intervention generates a certain fear, and this would be another factor apart from the fact that there is a certain inertia to consider that the lack of hearing is not something important to remedy, and families do not know how much benefit it can bring them.
Well, I got my cochlear implant on one side 13 years ago, and it used to be very helpful. I had a lot of help from it, because I got tinnitus on the other side, I decided to go for another implant on the other side also, and it is it is extremely helpful. I'm very grateful that I can have it. That I'm, in fact, born at the right period to have such help, and I cannot live without it anymore, because if my battery is on low, I don't hear anything anymore. So it's essential to me. It became something not just to help, something to help me, but it's really essential.
I'm very glad with my cochlear implants. Now I can speak with you and with them. So the social life is a lot easier.
Therefore, we are facing an incomplete and imprecise information. This brings us to the point that we want to claim, apart from screening for the elderly, that it can be summarized in one sentence. We need more clear and rigorous information. Before we finish there are 3 more points that we cannot forget. The first one refers to the fact that for cochlear implant to work correctly, we need adequate hearing rehabilitation, which is not always considered in the health services, and this is basic. We know that in minors, rehabilitation is usually linked to education, but when this period ends, the hearing qualification for young people, adults, and even people aging, it's usually non-existent. The second is that it affects quality programming, fitting, since without the relevant audiological adjustments, we will not get the most of our devices. Third, we must add to the programming and rehabilitation other technologies, connectivity for a greater effectiveness of communicative accessibility that promotes social interaction and inclusion of the users in the society as full-fledged citizens. In conclusions, I will remind you that having hearing health is not expensive. It's an economic investment in the future, and is profitable in the medium term for society. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Teresa, for this very important overview, and we fully agree. I think we need to provide quality care. We need to give much more information, and definitely hearing care professionals should also inform people when it's best to have what kind of solution. Now, for a change, I have to introduce myself, but I'll make it short. So my name is Mark Laureyns. I'm an audiologist from Belgium, but working in Italy. I am a member of the steering committee of the World Hearing Forum and president of the European Association of Hearing Aid Professionals. To be clear, that association also covers the fitting of hearing aids, cochlear implants, other implants, and also focus on tinnitus management and other aspects of audiology and hearing care. So let me give myself the floor for this next talk, And we'll talk about why and how to avoid the consequences of untreated hearing loss. Why and how to avoid the consequences of untreated hearing loss. Now, what are the consequences of untreated hearing loss according to the WHO World Report on Hearing? Communication problems, social isolation, loneliness, depression, employment problems and burnout, psychosocial and cognitive health issues, lowering of the quality of life, and last but not least, the higher prevalence of dementia. Now let's start with communication. In a very late, recently published article in Ear and Hearing, the association between hearing loss and surgical complications in older adults is discussed. The conclusions of this article is that for every 10 dB increase in hearing loss, you will get a 14% increase in the odds of developing a post-operative complication. You can imagine that communication before surgery is essential. It's very important that the patient is aware of what is going to happen and can explain the details to the surgeon. Unfortunately, if you have untreated hearing loss, this may become quite complicated and lead to complications. By the way, this is also the case for people using hearing aids and cochlear implants. If they are removed too early in the process, so before the patient had the chance to discuss all the options and give good information to the surgeon, you may also have this kind of communication problems which should not arise. Another topic is unaddressed hearing loss and employment. Shan and others published in the Journal of Laryngology and Otology the following article, and they conclude that the highest quality studies currently available indicate that adult onset hearing loss is associated with unemployment. It is also referred to in the World Report on Hearing. Hansen looked at the Swedish population, a very large sample, and there they saw there was a statistically significant difference in prevalence of hearing problems between those people with higher burnout scores and lower scores. Here you see the levels of burnout scores. And this is in fact, the blue is indicating that they have either tinnitus or hearing complaints, or in red, both hearing tinnitus and hearing complaints. And you see right away that the percentage of people having these issues in the highest group of the group with the highest burnout scores is significantly higher. We also evaluated this at the Thomas More University College on 253 subjects. And we looked at the ANL acceptable noise level test. That is a test that will evaluate how much noise you can expect during a conversation. And there we saw a very significant correlation with burnout signals. The same thing went for self-reported noise acceptance. So if you put it on the score yourself, how well you are in accepting noise, you see this correlates highly with burnout signals. The same for self-reported understanding speech and noise, and for auditory concentration. And finally, also tinnitus plays a role. Exactly the same conclusion as in the earlier studies from Hansen. Now, this is also related to the design of the office environment in which you are working. As you see here in a communication from the Harvard Business Review, the truth about open offices clearly indicate that open offices may be a pretty bad idea, definitely if they are large and there's a lot of people in them, to result in burnout when there are communication problems and hearing problems. Therefore, you may want to look into this. It's essential that people with hearing loss treat their hearing, so you get treated hearing loss. But on top of that, if that's done, you also take the design and the space into account to make communication easy and avoid unneeded exposure to sounds and noise. What about social isolation and loneliness? In otolaryngology, head and neck surgery, Shukla and others presented this study. In fact, people with hearing loss, particularly those who do not use hearing aids, show elevated levels of loneliness. The conclusions of this study is that their findings is that hearing loss is associated with loneliness and social isolation. And this, of course, can have significant implications for other aspects of cognitive and psychosocial health. And here's a fairly well-known publication in the Lancet Commissions, Dementia Prevention, Intervention and Care, the 220 report of the Lancet Commission. And here you see that there are 12 modifiable risk factors, and the bar in blue indicates hearing loss. So if you can treat hearing loss, you start to modify this aspect, and you will lower the risk of dementia 8.2%. It's the highest score of all modifiable risk factors, but you shouldn't wait too long. You should do it in midlife, which means don't wait until you're 80 before you start treating your hearing loss. Please do it in due time. And here you see the factors we have talked about: communication, social isolation, loneliness, employment burnout, depression, quality of life, psychosocial and cognitive health, and dementia. So now it's time to take action, because don't just accept that this will happen. There are many options available, and that's why the World Health Organization also has a very clear action plan. So the action plan has two fundamental layers. The first layer is prevention, and that is why WHO has the Make Listening Safe initiative and has created many standards and documents to support this. Ensure that people don't listen unsafe to devices and systems. So there's a standard for all your smartphones playing music. Make sure they have they measure weekly dose, they are safe, and you inform the users. Also, personal amplifiers need to be safe. It is fine to get some extra amplification, but do in a safe way, and it's the same logic as the standard for smart devices and systems. And then there's also a new standard on venues and events to ensure that hearing protection is available, that they use lower levels, and at that moment also there is monitoring in place. The second layer is screening, and there's a very interesting hearing screening handbook from WHO available. We will share the details at the end of this session, and we will also make sure that in the handout you will find a link. So hearing screening should be done for newborns and infants. That's in place in a lot of countries, but definitely not in all. There should be school-based hearing screening. And finally, and that is something which has to be worked on a lot also in Europe, is that from the age of 50 onwards, all adults should get their hearing screened. WHO has a very good tool. It's called the Hear WHO Screener. It's something an app that you can install on your smartphone. It's free of charge. It's already available in English and Spanish, but we see that Dutch and French is coming soon. So please go and check if it's available for your language, and please advise all to do this in an easy and early way. And then finally, of course, intervention. Intervention which should be timely and appropriate. So timely and appropriate hearing care, which can be surgery, which can be hearing aids, cochlear implants, which can be rehabilitation, availability of assistive technology, captioning, so many extra things. We shouldn't see this as a real cost. In fact, intervention is an investment. As you will see from the presentation later, investment in hearing care is very cost effective. You get a return on investment of more than 30 to 1. So for every euro you invest in hearing care, you will get a return of 30 euro at least back in Western Europe. It's also important that intervention is person-centered care, really listening to the needs and doing this with full involvement of the user to be sure to be effective and to be also sure that it's adopted in the right way. Now, let me give you a case story from Belgium. In Belgium, the National Institute for health and disability insurance is creating and is launching a whole campaign on the 3rd of March this year. The tagline of the campaign is "Hearing loss is never normal." It's directed to first-line health workers towards general practitioners and others. And the important aspects is detect, notice the first signs of hearing loss, make it easy to discuss hearing problems with every patient, no matter the age, because we see too much in older age that hearing loss is deemed normal for the age. Hearing loss is never normal. Hearing loss leads to communication problems and all the aspects you have seen before. And then the third bullet point is, please refer. If you see there is a need for intervention, if there is a need for more assessment, please refer to the ENT specialists, to an audiologist and a hearing center, wherever, to be sure that hearing loss is evaluated and due intervention is identified in good cooperation with the general practitioner, of course. They have created a dedicated webpage where you can find all the information on the consequences of untreated hearing loss, where you can find why the role of the general practitioner is so important in identifying hearing loss and to talk about it, where you can see what are the early signs of hearing loss, where you can find red flag conditions that require more urgent referral, and where there's also a hearing screening questionnaire available with the interpretation that the GP can use in communication with the user. So this is what they will find on the website. There will be a video talking about the consequences of untreated hearing loss. There will be a link to the Hear WHO app so people can test and evaluate their hearing themselves. There will always be flyers available. So here you see a flyer talking about the impact on work. So did you know that untreated hearing loss increases the risk for burnout, unemployment, and early retirement? But of course, there's more. There's also another one talking about this important event, the World Hearing Day, 3rd of March. Hearing loss is never normal at any age. Facilitate to make it easy to discuss hearing loss, to anticipate the possible consequences for health and quality of life. So I hope this gave a quite good overview of that Belgian campaign. There are many aspects available, so please watch out for more information. You will find a lot of information in the World Report on Hearing. The link is here. Please go and check out the Hear WHO app. And there's also a very interesting new training manual available for first-line health workers, talking about the importance of detecting hearing loss, what you can do about it, and how you can refer in a very good way. All available at the WHO website. Please come and join the World Hearing Forum to help us promote quality hearing care and talk about it in a very good way. And I want to thank you for your attention, and please enjoy the rest of this lunch debate. Thank you so much. So, and now we can move on to our last speaker. Ariane Laplante-Lévesque is the technical specialist in eye and vision, and also in ear and hearing care at the WHO European Office. Ariane has done published a lot of articles and done very good research on the importance of quality hearing care and the fact that it needs to be patient or client or person-centered. I think she's very well renowned on this topic, but I'm happy she will now explain the importance of quality hearing care and rehabilitation in Europe. Ariane, the floor is yours.
Good day. My name is Ariane Laplante-Lévesque. I lead the program on ear and hearing care, as well as eye and vision care at the World Health Organization Regional Office for Europe. It's with great pleasure that I accepted the invitation to participate in this important virtual lunch debate today. I know that the organizations that I've presented today so far, they have converging visions for the future of ear and hearing care in Europe. And I'm also aware of the danger of presenting last in such events, because there might be some repetition that might be occurring. I hope you'll bear with me. I also come from a family of teachers, and We used to like to say in our family, as the saying goes, that repetition is the mother of learning, the father of action, and the architect of accomplishment. So maybe some repetition is okay after all. And most importantly, I hope that you'll agree with me that in that repetition also comes an idea of alignment. And so I hope that today leaves you with the clear message that multi-sectoral stakeholders within ear and hearing care, whether that be representatives of users, professionals, the industry, or intergovernmental agencies, they have a lot in common, and they're very good at working together to support the strengthening of ear and hearing services in Europe. Today, I'll present the perspectives of the World Health Organization's Regional Office for Europe, and the perspectives more specifically on quality hearing care and rehabilitation. You've already heard from my colleague Shelly Chadha from the WHO headquarters in Geneva. You probably know that WHO divides the world into 6 regions, as you can see on the screen. The WHO European region is made up of 53 countries, and that includes all the 27 countries of the European Union. The office for the WHO European region is in Copenhagen, Denmark, and this is where I'm joining from today. I will set the scene by describing briefly the current state and challenges that I see as being faced by hearing and hearing care. I'll summarize the main messages of the WHO World Report on Hearing in terms of how to achieve quality hearing care and rehabilitation for all in Europe. The content of my presentation includes work from a whole group of people, including from WHO, led by Shelly Chadha, as well as other organizations, and many of those are represented here today. So thank you to all of you. Ear and hearing care, they're amongst one of the most common health problems that are encountered in populations, and they're on the rise. Here are some figures from the WHO European region. It's estimated that about 20% of the population live with some degree of hearing loss, and it's expected that unless action is taken, this will rise to 25% by 2050. We say that in children, over half, nearly 60% of hearing loss is due to avoidable causes that could be prevented should we have public health measures implemented. And some of those public health measures could be, for example, immunization in girls and women and good neonatal care. Likewise, in adults, most common causes of hearing loss, such as exposure to loud noises or to chemicals that could damage the hearing system, which we call ototoxic, they're preventable. Now, I've just told you that ear and hearing problems are amongst some of the most common health problems encountered in the community, but that doesn't mean that they're benign or that they're harmless, actually far from it. And investing in ear and hearing care, it's important for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's essential for good functioning for those living with ear and hearing problems, and also for those that are at risk of developing those problems. So thinking either of prevention and addressing the problems. So, and investing in ear and hearing care is also important for a second reason. That's because it is cost effective at a societal level. At a societal level, lack of ear and hearing care services, it comes at a very high cost due to the reduced educational and work opportunities that unfortunately often come with untreated hearing loss and the resulting social isolation that we see too often. In the WHO European region, we estimate that hearing loss costs about 210 billion euros annually. That's the cost of not addressing hearing loss. When we address hearing loss, we make one step towards making sure that all people realize their full potential, that all people contribute to the best that they can to society. And also addressing hearing loss doesn't have to be expensive. In the WHO European region, it would cost less than €15 annually per capita to provide ear and hearing care services. Based on economical analyses, we think that every euro invested would result in a return on investment of over 30 euros over a 10-year period. I'm just going to repeat that. Every euro invested results in a return on investment of 30 euros. This is why we talk about an investment in ear and hearing care rather than expenditure. The problem now is that many people do not have access to the hearing services that they need. This may be due to coverage that's not inadequate. For example, a part of the population could be left without access to hearing services, or it could be that some interventions are not covered by current health and social care policies. It can also be due to lack of professionals that people are not able to access hearing services. It could either be specialists or generalists that are not available. It could also be training of those professionals that currently doesn't reflect the best practices or doesn't reflect population needs. Those issues, and therefore these areas for action, they've been raised already by several of the presenters today. Here I take the example of the specialist hearing healthcare workforce. Coverage is unequal. As you can see, some countries clearly lack either ear and nose and throat specialist, audiologist, speech and language therapist, as well as teachers of the deaf. I see the solution as twofold. Firstly, it's about increasing the training capacity and the retention of the specialist healthcare workforce. And secondly, it's also about training the non-specialist healthcare workforce, whether they be general practitioners, nurses, or community health workers, so that they can identify ear and hearing conditions, so that they can offer primary care that is effective, and also they can refer more complex cases where needed. You've already heard today that 60% of the need for ear and hearing care services can be addressed at the primary level of care. Before we continue on solutions for quality hearing care and rehabilitation in Europe, I'd like to just pause for a little bit. And that's because I'd like to introduce you to someone, and this someone is Paulina Lewandowska. She's young. She's wise. She's a woman from Poland. She's full of energy. She's a PhD student, and she's an advocate for hard of hearing individuals like her. She's also the president of the International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People. We're gathering today to talk about the future of ear and hearing care policies in Europe. And therefore, I find it very fitting to give the voice to Paulina as someone who has lived experience of hearing loss and as someone who represents the future of Europe. Recently, I asked Paulina whether there's a myth that she'd like to debunk, and I would like to share her reply with you. Paulina says, I wear glasses. When I put them on, suddenly I can see everything clearly. I can function normally. My vision no longer affects me. When a person receives cochlear implants or hearing aids, this is when rehabilitation begins. It's not a cure. Situations will arise when the person's functioning is still impacted, even with cochlear implants or hearing aids, for example, in noisy places. Sometimes people tell me, you have hearing aids. Why can't you hear me? Why do I have to repeat? People think that hearing devices cure hearing loss, and this is a myth that I want to debunk. So, with Paulina's input in mind, what is quality hearing care and rehabilitation? Clearly, it includes hearing devices, but it's also much more than that. The WHO World Report on Hearing, which was published in 2021, outlined a vision for integrated, people-centered ear and hearing care. It said that we need to integrate prioritized ear and hearing care interventions, and that needs to be delivered through a strengthened health system. And the acronym HEARING was being used to describe the different components of integrated people-centered ear and hearing care. The H stands for hearing screening and intervention, and that includes hearing screening and early intervention programs through the life course, So with newborns, infants, children that either yet to reach school or that are currently in school, those that are at risk of developing hearing loss, for example, those that are exposed to noise, those that are exposed to chemicals that might damage the hearing, which we call ototoxic, and older adults. The E stands for ear disease prevention and management, and that includes addressing common ear diseases. For example, middle ear infection, so otitis media, is very common in children. That's an example of a common ear disease that needs to be prevented and addressed quickly. So with early identification at the primary level of care and as necessary medical and surgical management. The A stands for access to technology. And by that, we mean access to affordable, good quality hearing devices such as hearing aids and implants, along with the batteries and the services that are required for people to use those devices independently. And also availability of other forms of hearing assistive technology. By R, we mean rehabilitation services. And this is partly what Polina was hinting at, saying that technology is one thing, but people with hearing loss also need multidisciplinary, family-centered rehabilitation services for children, but also for adults, because counseling and rehabilitation will also be required for people of all ages. By I, we mean improved communication. That includes captioning, just like today, in professional as well as in recreational settings, sign language, interpretation, which are important in all settings and especially in educational and healthcare settings so that people have access to the information they need. By N, we mean noise reduction, and that can be, in the workplace for people who work in places where the noise level could be damaging to their hearing. It can be through standards for safe listening through devices. For example, when we listen through our mobile phones, our tablets, or our computers. Regulation in venues, for example, in bars, in places where noise levels could be high, and targeted programs so that teenagers know how to listen well and throughout their lifetime. By G, we mean greater community engagement. So that means making sure that all the stakeholders are brought at the table, just like today, and making sure that organizations, associations that represent people that are deaf and hard of hearing have the resources that they need. So overall, hearing across the life course requires a multi-stakeholder action through collaborations just like today. With these considerations, WHO called upon its member states to scale up ear and hearing care for achieving the global targets of 20% relative increase in hearing care coverage by 2030, in alignment with the United Nations Agenda for Sustainable Development. There's 3 focus areas that have been identified. You're seeing them on the screen right now. It's about newborn hearing screening. It's about coverage of hearing devices in adults. And it's also about identification and management of ear diseases and hearing loss in children that are of school age. You can read more about those targets and indicators in the WHO World Report on Hearing. So our overall goal is that people in need have equal access to quality ear and hearing care services. And overall, we can think of 3 main actions that we need to look at: prevention of ear and hearing conditions through effective public health strategies to prevent the occurrence of or the progression of hearing loss. Early identification, so that when hearing loss occurs, it's important to identify it as early as possible to have the best outcomes. And that can be systematic screening of people across the life course, as I've said already. And I just want you to remember that it's technically and practically possible to identify hearing loss at all stages of life, from birth to all age. And when hearing loss is identified, it can be effectively addressed through a holistic approach that includes provision of hearing technology as well as person-centered rehabilitation. And like most things, really, one size rarely fits all. So each country should determine their strengths and challenges by conducting an evidence-informed prioritization exercise where all the relevant stakeholders from the relevant sectors should be involved to address the challenges that are faced regarding ear and hearing care, and to move on the path to universal health coverage, where people have access to the care that they need without suffering financial hardship. The countries need to adopt this integrated, people-centered approach to ear and hearing care. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to our live debate following very shortly. Also, I just want to remind you that WHO is committed to providing technical support to countries that are embarking on the journey of strengthening their health systems. Here is my email address. You see it on the screen. You're very welcome to contact me directly should you wish to explore technical support that's available at WHO towards integrating people-centered ear and hearing care within your national health systems. Thank you.
So thank you, Ariane, for this very good overview, and I think a very important aspect of making sure rehabilitation is available in Europe and all the aspects of quality hearing care. Now I suggest we open the debate for all, so please, all participants in the panel, activate your video and your microphone, definitely the ones who have been speaking, so we can see all of you. That is wonderful. And the good thing is we already have a list of questions and they were automatically ranked up. So I would suggest that maybe the first question first to go to Shelly, and it was the one with the highest ranking. It's a question from Carol asking if primary care physicians are very quick to refer adults for hearing care and what to do about that. What do you think, Shelly?
Yeah, I looked at the question and I must say that I had to admit that we don't have any evidence to say that, yes, they refer adults all the time or not all the time or 60% or 20% of the time. So we don't have that data to say that. What we do know from inputs from experts while we were developing hearing screening guidance and so on for older adults is that this is an area which is very commonly neglected. It is often not tested because hearing testing is thought to be really specialized and not easily available, not accessible for everybody, whereas the facts are that it can be done, even as Mark mentioned, by people themselves. They can screen for their own hearing, but also it can be done in primary care clinics. So it's really not an excuse that this is something super sophisticated that needs to be done, but a screening can be done. So we do have that information from expert sources that adults with hearing loss are often not directed in the right pathway for two reasons, mainly. One, because hearing is not often screened. And even when people do complain of some hearing difficulty, often it is indicated that this is, it's just accepted. So that's also awareness raising that needs to be done amongst health professionals. So these I see as the two problems. If you ask me to give you studies to substantiate it, I cannot do that. But as I said, this is what we perceive from expert feedback.
Thank you, Shelly. I just want to add, because I looked into the Eurotrack survey, and they typically look into the people who self-report to have hearing problems when they go to their ENT and to their GP. How many times are they advised or get a referral for hearing care? And we see it is ranging. I think the lowest number is Poland and Belgium, where 36% and 46% are referred for quality ear and hearing care. Going up, the average in Europe seems to be around 55%. And the highest numbers are, in fact, France and Norway, where 64 to 67% are referred. So that's about the numbers I have from, that's about the best you could find. They don't differentiate between children and adults. So I would hope, and I sincerely think, that children are normally referred more directly. Anything anybody else can add to this topic? Maybe Ariane, can you add something to this?
Oh, I just very much concur that I think we have to think of accessibility of services overall and to have a broad lens. So to think that we need to have a healthcare workforce that is a facilitator rather than a barrier, because we're also seeing in the chat today some examples where perhaps the healthcare workforce has unfortunately been a barrier. That's one thing. And that we also have to think of all other types of barriers to accessibility. So it can be cost sharing, so the fact that there's some cost associated to the services. It can also be the fact that the services are not close to the person where they live, where they work. It can be services that are not person-centered, as we were talking earlier today as well. That becomes a barrier in itself if the person is feeling that their needs are not being addressed, or if they're just being a number as part of a chain, so that the interventions go with the need of the persons and their communication partners, their families. And so I think for sure the healthcare workforce has to be looked at to make sure that they're facilitators, and we have to take a broad approach to think of all other barriers and to break them down one at a time.
Thank you, Ariane. Lidia, you also wanted to add something to this? Lidia?
Thank you. Actually responded to the question, and the anecdotal evidence across Europe, anywhere you go, but especially in the UK, was from my experience as the chair of National Association of Deaf People, that actually a lot of times our concerns are being dismissed as adults. And often it's also the hearing loss is seen as an aging process. Therefore, we're not going to do much because there is no need really. And I think that is a problem. And I think, we need to address that. And we're going to look at this as well as the European Federation to see how our members and population at large is listened to, if they are, from the adult's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Lidia. Oh, Teresa, did you also want to add something? I see you raising your hand, please. Yeah.
I will translate for her. Okay.
Wonderful.
I agree with Ariane that politicians should know the economical part. These numbers really help when you are trying to sell them these screenings. In a lot of countries, they gave even people go to oh, sorry, I don't know the word, to retirement. Yes, a lot of people go to retirement early because sometimes they have hearing loss as one of the topics that makes them to go in retirement early. So if you really think about it, this person stops paying taxes in a way and starts to receive taxes. So if we put some kind of investment in them, probably these persons can keep working for a while. Politicians sometimes need exactly to talk in their terms, to talk in an economical way, so they really understand that this is really an investment, not just for quality of life, but an economical one as well.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a very good statement. Thank you so much. There's another question that in fact came from Anonymous, so I don't know who has raised that question. It's kind of asking what kind of hearing care to provide when hearing aids and cochlear implants don't work, or people have a much too severe hearing loss. Since this is so much related to what is already mentioned in the World Report on Hearing, I would suggest to give that question to Shelly.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. And thank you to Anonymous for asking that very important question, because often we talk a lot about hearing technology, but we forget that there are other needs and not forget, but we tend to overlook or not talk about other options for those who either could not benefit from hearing technology, or do not have access to hearing technology, or do not prefer to use hearing technology. And we do have the option of learning sign language, which is a valid way of communication for people to acquire, communicate with their family and friends, but also to gain education, to gain livelihood, and to become socially active and adjusted. So I think that is a very important part of hearing rehabilitation that it's great to acknowledge and include as part of the entire menu of interventions for hearing care. And it is very well mentioned, as you said, Mark, in the World Report on Hearing, along with the use of other assistive technologies like captioning, which we are currently using as well.
Yes, thank you, Shelly. And then there's another question asking, how can we create much more awareness to the wider public? That question is coming from Claire. I think it's an important topic. Let's maybe start with Ariane. Do you have ideas how we can create more awareness in the general public for the need of ear and hearing care?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think we're all maybe tainted a little bit by what we think is most important. I think there's many ways to roam, definitely, when it comes to that. And I think they're all equally important. In my presentation, I chose to give the floor partially to Paulina, who is a young person with hearing loss. And I think that's important to engage younger people. They are tomorrow's generation, and it's really important, I think, that they're on board. I think it's also important to engage with people who are not specialists in one way or another within ear and hearing care, because they often have different perspectives. How to get started? I think it's also about, when it comes to awareness, I think it's also about recognizing the breadth of services that we can cover, from promotion and prevention and all the way to management of conditions. And this is also something that Paulina and I discussed, for example, as someone with hearing loss. She also says it's so important also that we discuss promotion and prevention. So to think more broadly. And I think partnerships generally, this is also something that I mentioned. And I think today is a great example of bringing different people together. I can maybe just give a tiny example of, in my workplace right now, I'm working with a nurse, and we've worked together so that she was able to provide hearing screenings during this week to our colleagues. And so suddenly her level of understanding of ear and hearing conditions has improved greatly. She's also become an advocate around her own team of primary health professionals, and they know that they have me as well, that they can kind of bounce off if they have some more specific questions. So that's just a tiny example, but just to say that I think to not be afraid of cross-fertilizing ideas, of bringing different perspectives, of thinking broadly as well, that it's of course providing good identification and management services to people who have ear and hearing conditions, but it's also thinking more broadly about the continuum of care. And of course, also trying to involve people all across their life course. So I've talked about younger people, but also, of course, people of all ages. So I'm sorry, I'm being very broad in my answer. I'm not giving a very specific answer, but I think that's because, as I said, I think there's many ways to get there. And it's great that we have events like today so that we can bring in our different perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Lidia, did you want to add something to it? I saw you raising your hand, I thought.
I couldn't actually agree more with what Ariane has said. And I think creating platforms where we can actually work together, all different professionals, all different experiences, coming together is probably the most important. For this, I'm really grateful for the World Health Organization to support us with development of the World Hearing Forum, which is a great platform, but this platform needs to be repeated nationwide as well, nationally in different countries, so we can really work together and find solutions together. Thank you.
Thank you, Lidia. Now, expanding on this, because I gave an example of this Belgian campaign by the Belgian Ministry of Health. And when we were preparing this together with general practitioners and ENTs, we were surprised how surprised they were about learning about the consequences of untreated hearing loss. It was even surprising that a lot of ENTs weren't aware that there are so many consequences of untreated hearing loss, but generally for the general practitioners, this was kind of opening a world. And what I've seen, if you talk about that and they talk about the consequences and their very important role on prevention and prevention of those consequences, it's a lot easier to convince them to take a step forward. So although we think we communicate a lot, I think there's a lot to do to communicate much more. And of course, it's a shame, Shelly, that not everybody knows the World Report on hearing by heart, because it should be so very nicely mentioned there. But there's a very big job into doing that. Teresa?
She would like to mention that sometimes we go to doctors, but most of the time, one of the persons that receives you first in primary care is nurses. So for example, in Spain, one of the things that we did a collaboration with nurses, with one of the biggest organizations of nurses, and that really helped a lot. It raised awareness as well. Sometimes if you raise awareness in society in general, it will help as well. One of the questions was about that, and I think that we really need to work on raise awareness in international, intergenerational settings. For example, you can try to get a collaboration with a theater for kids, and then usually who accompanies these kids? Fathers, parents, and usually their grandparents. So at the same time, before this theater starts, you can send a small message about hearing loss that they have to take care of for kids, but as well for older people if they want to keep going with their grandkids to these events. So sometimes working in general society issues or society moments help us as well raise awareness in the profession, the health as professionals as well.
Thank you. We have a very good point. Now, there's also another question coming from Christine. She's saying, well, in Belgium, there's occupational medicine is taking care of screening of people in the workplace, hearing screening. So that is an example of adult hearing screening. Now, maybe we need to differentiate on what we mean. And since Shelly, you were kind of the driving force behind that new manual on hearing screening, could you add to that how you see the difference and what should be the focus on adult screening for the hopefully short future?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mark, for that question. And of course, screening for hearing loss in older adults is different from occupational hearing conservation and the hearing screening that must take part as part of occupational hearing conservation programs. From WHO's side, what we recommend is that for all adults above 50, we should have hearing screening every 5 years. And this is, we are talking about universal and systematic, not that when you go to a doctor and say that your hearing is, you're not hearing well, you should get a screen, but it should be part of the regular health screens and health checkups, that they should have this at 5 years, every 5 years at the very least. And then following subsequently, it should be done every 2 years. So that is the recommendation when we are talking about systematic universal hearing screening, given that hearing loss in older adults is extremely common. And above the age of 60, we know that more than 30% people have a hearing loss. So that is about hearing screening. And Mark, I'm going to just overstep my boundaries to request you that I would also like to answer this question from Melissa, who talks about access to hearing care, especially at primary level of care. So since that is the kind of key message, but whenever you're ready, I would like to answer that question.
So why don't you go ahead, I think, or maybe what we can do, just give us a second for something else. I will let you answer that, and then I would kindly ask you to give your concluding remarks for this lunch debate, Shelly. So we'll end with that question. Is that okay for you?
Perfect.
Okay. But did Teresa want to add? Because I saw her raising her hand on the question. Not really. Okay. Now let me go to the most popular question of all in the Q&A. Will the handouts be available? What will happen there? We got okay from all the speakers that we can share their video and the handout. They will be available through the associations organizing this. So through AIA, through EFHOH, to Euro-CIU, through EHIMA, they will make it available. Just go and check their website. We did promise them, though, we will only do this after the 3rd of March, so we don't give away the scoop of what they will present at other sessions. So that will happen, but they will all be easily available. And let's then now move to you, Shelly, for that question and maybe also for the concluding remarks for this lunch debate.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark, also for the honor of being able to make the concluding remarks. But I think this question really frames very well what the topic this year is about. It is access to ear and hearing care, not just hearing screening, because hearing screening, of course, is the first step. It is a very important first step, as we have determined for various reasons, in adults and in children. And here, the important thing is that we can't just screen and leave. We have to make sure that people then have access to the care, to the rehabilitation that has to be provided. And it is with this idea that WHO highlighting that over 60% of the needs for hearing care can actually be met at the primary level, has also developed this training material and a lot of accompanying community resources that are available to anybody who wishes to use them. The idea being that, of course, there is a gradation of what can be done at the primary level by doctors and healthcare workers who are trained to provide that care. And then what can be done by specialists or super specialists who are available at the secondary and tertiary levels of care. And this categorization first is very important, this understanding what can be done at that level, a realistic expectation, and then how it can be done. And this is what the WHO's efforts are all about. It is about strengthening this care, this service across the continuum of care at the primary level. And for this, the training resource we are launching is one effort. Another effort that we are currently undertaking is to develop service delivery models which are fit for purpose for being implemented in primary care settings for hearing aid services and so on. So that is really the focus of our work right now, is that services should trickle down to people where they need them, when they need them, and in a way that does not pose undue financial hardships for them, because that is the essence of universal health coverage that all countries are working to achieve. And for that to happen, we need to make sure that hearing care is integrated. Not just we as stakeholders and professionals working in this field, but countries, governments need to make sure that they make the commitment to facilitate and foster this integration across the continuum of care and across the course of life. I'd like to conclude with that and with a vote of thanks to you, to the member of European Parliament, David Lega, and also to all of those who have joined us virtually today.
Thank you so much. By the way, for those people who have put a question in the Q&A, if they were not anonymous, I will forward that question to the people who attended to, and we will give you the answer by mail afterwards. So you can be sure that none is forgotten and you get an answer to all your questions. I want to thank everybody for joining us, all the efforts, all the speakers. Thank you so much, and wish you a further good move towards World Hearing Day on the 3rd of March. Thank you and all the best. Bye.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.